Hello, you golfing legends, and welcome back to another episode of the original Off Course. I'm your host, Dan Edwards, and joining me for round two of GT Talk is Mr. Josh Talge from Titleist. Josh, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Dan. I mean, who's got it better than us, right? Look at us, just enjoying talking about some GT medals today. We're in the heart of golf season. I mean, it's pretty good times.
There's some pretty solid rumors around the forum that you dragged on the driver show talking purely drivers so you could come back for fairways. Is there any truth to that?
I definitely did not mean to do that, and you'd think that in 40 plus minutes we could have gotten to more than one product, but it's a great opportunity to come back. I always love being here, and love getting questions from you and from the forum. You know, I think that the THP crew is a very informed group. They ask great questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing both some of our favorite THPers and you in under 10 days.
That's exciting, isn't it? I think actually this will drop probably right as we're coming up on the event. So,
Oh,
we get to reflect on a week from now, but it'll be a little bit closer to that time. So that
oh,
actually works out really well because, well, first of all, I want to circle back and say that GT for you guys is generational technology. It's a big story, and for us to yammer on for 50 minutes on one of the products, I think is a really nice representation of what went into it, what has changed for you guys. And since that time, not only have we seen more conversations go up about them, but you also get to hear a lot of feedback from people who've gone and hit them for themselves, and have, so far as I can tell on THP anyway, have been incredibly positive for not just from a Titleist perspective, but from an upgrade from TSR. So I do want to I do want to ask you right out of the gate here, what has the feedback been that you've seen, away from our space, so that the people that you talk to about GT?
we're off to a terrific start, and it really does make us feel great. And it's not so much about like, hey, we're selling a whole bunch of drivers, we're selling a bunch of fairways. What makes us feel really great is all the notes that we're getting. You know, whether it's reading the forums or getting emails or getting texts from people that are just like, holy cow, I can't believe how good this thing is. Or I'm playing my best golf. I just got home in two on a par five, or I just carried this bunker I haven't carried in 10 years, or I've never carried. I'm in places in the golf course I've never been. And those are the things that when you start to think about it, you're like, all right, we've really helped someone's golf game. And that's our goal here is we want to help you play your best golf and enjoy this great game as much as possible. And if we can just do that in even the smallest way, we feel really fulfilled. And certainly GT is helping so many golfers do that, whether it's, all the guys out on the different tours, or, now we're in the consumer marketplace. And I think that's where it's really fun because, you know, if you can find someone 8, 10 yards or more, it really changes their game and brightens them in a way that is enjoyable to see on our side.
I want to ask you a quick question before we really dig into tour a bit, because I found this interesting. You mentioned getting 8 to 10 yards, and what I think people don't recognize is there's more than one way to get there. Increase ball speed, increase forgiveness, promote. But with forgiveness comes additional ball speed. With lower spin comes more distance, or in some cases higher spin comes more distance. So finding that perfect product is a pretty big deal for anyone who's willing to put the time in to get fit and pursue it. So has it seemed to be faster, easier, or different for GT when you get these bits of feedback?
I think that it's been different in that there's a wow factor there. And I think the wow factor starts with, hey, I had a pretty good driver and I was happy with my driver, but people have been telling me I gotta go try this GT, and I went and did it and it delivered. And I think the wow factor starts from, we again, don't listen to the marketing guy. Please go see one of our fitters, go try this yourself. But the stories I'm hearing and seeing are from people who have done just that. And it starts with, they typically just take the head off their driver if they're a Titleist player and put the new one on, and they immediately see some types of results that they haven't seen before. And to your end, it usually starts with, wow, there's speed here. And then in the hands of a really well, educated fitter, you can start to dial in that speed and make sure that we've got you the right launch, make sure we've got this really consistent spin window, and really tighten up that dispersion. And suddenly, not only are you hitting it farther, but you're hitting it more consistent, you're finding more fairways. And that's when you run away being like, I can't wait to play this thing and get it on a golf course.
Yeah, I think the other piece of that, and especially when we don't have the privilege of running through launch monitors, not everyone has access to that. Sometimes you just grab a head and go hit it. A lot of people are leaning really hard on not just ball flight, but also sound, feel, feedback, whatever you want to call it. And personally, at least what I've read and how I feel about it is GT's really setting itself apart in that regard, in that it sounds really, really good. And it sounds good all across the face.
That's really important to us, is that all the little details matter. It does start with performance, and then the performance that you can see on a launch monitor, you can see from ball flight. But just as important to us is the idea of look, sound, and feel has got to measure up. Our former head of R&D, Dan Stone, had this great mantra, and he would say it all the time. He'd say, always forward, never backward, got to be Titleist. And that idea of it's got to be Titleist has a lot to do with, we want our products to look a certain way, and we want them to feel a certain way. And on the look standpoint, I think it's really fun. The one thing, you asked about feedback from the forums, there's still quite a bit of buzz in different circles being like, oh, this is the same old Titleist driver. It looks the same, kind of feels the same as what we've seen in the past. And then they'll say, but I'm seeing more speed, and that's really great. And what's amazing about that is that we've changed everything about the construction of this driver and the fairways. It's just that we've hidden it because we want you to look down at something and see this terrific shape, but also have really clean lines. So, one of the things we hear a lot in this industry is, you gotta have visible tech. You got visible technology for people to see. And we've basically made it invisible. We have a seamless thermoform crown that we're putting on our drivers and our fairways. So it's enabling this great performance, but it looks like your classic Titleist product. And then that crown is actually made of this material, this proprietary matrix polymer that we use, that sounds like metal. So when you drop it, it clangs. And that enables us to give you that great feel that you've always come to expect from a Titleist product. And feel is really important. That, for a lot of golfers, that represents right from the first swing, what's the overall quality and what's the performance that I'm going to get out of this product.
So I'm laughing a little bit here because the last time Josh came on, I made him drop the material he had twice just so people could really hear it. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode on the drivers specifically, you should definitely go check it out. Circling back on tour, what's the feedback been like out there? Is it like really rapidly getting into bags, or is it taking a little time?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. The first is, and boy, most of our audience has no idea about this. We've been the most played driver on the PGA Tour for the last 5 years straight. So this has been we've kind of snuck up on some people. But when I'm out and about, and people will be like, oh yeah, who is anyone playing? Who plays Titleist drivers on tour? Turns out it's most of the guys, which is a really good place to start. And they really give us feedback throughout the process. We're fortunate that we see our players so constantly, whether it's Titleist Performance Institute or week on, week out, where we've got our tour truck visiting with them. And so we take advantage of that. We show them really early shapes to get their feedback. We show them really early prototypes that sometimes we'll call a mule, where it doesn't have any of the fit and finish. It could just be a purely, silver metallic type head, and just be like, let's go hit these and see what we see from ball flight. Or as we're working on feel, here's different feel targets that we've got set up. Hit these and give us your feedback. And so we involve them throughout. So it makes it really easy when we go to something new, that it doesn't seem totally surprising to them. It is the first time for some of them. They might be seeing it in its final form, and it's really pretty, and it's got all the paint and the graphics where we want it. In most cases, they've experienced that product at some point during its development. And so again, makes it easy for the guys to put in play. But there's some cool ones that are out there. I think Brian Harmon is a really interesting story. Here's a guy who is not known as someone who crunches the golf ball, And if you go back to the start of the playoffs, he was actually leading in strokes gained off the tee. And he's someone who has added plus 5 miles an hour of ball speed going to GT. And so suddenly Brian Harman is one of those players who we were joking about earlier, is finding himself in different places on a golf course than he's ever been. And that's a really cool spot to be in when you're someone who we've all seen Brian Harman. He's not a physically imposing person, right? And really going for distance has never been a big part of his game. But now he gets to add that to the things he already does really well. And so that's fun to see. Other players, Justin Thomas and Max Homa, they're seeing things that they're like, hey, this is exactly what I had hoped to do. In Justin Thomas's case, he has gone into a GT2. He's historically been a 3-shape player, but he loves this new shape of the 2, and he feels like he can go as hard as he wants so that he can have almost 2 speeds. His typical drive, or sometimes he'll go for his big swing, and you'll know that one if you're watching any of the events and you see him lift his left heel. That left heel comes off the ground, his backswing. That's when he's going. He's really trying to maximize it, and he'll bump that up. His ball speed jumps a couple, 2-3 miles an hour.
There have been some commentary surrounding the decisions that have been made on tour on which heads they're going with. A lot of surprise on how many folks are leaning on the 2. I ended up in the 3, which surprised me because, as you know, Talge, I'm always in the 4 for whatever reason. It might have something to do with my attack angle. We're not here to judge, okay? It's fine. But long story short,
that's why we have all the models, Dan.
Yeah.
Everyone swings. The swings are like snowflakes. We gotta have something for everybody.
But it's interesting to see like this new head has almost unlocked a lot of things for people that they were traditionally focused on something else before. Is that really resonating on tour right now? Like the freedom to change it up and to gain benefit from that?
It started a little bit with TSR2, and it's really continued into GT2. The shape continues to get better, so that there's some players who in the past would just say, I'm not playing that. It doesn't meet my eye. It's just too bulky. It's too bulbous. But now we're in this very sleek shape that is still exceptionally forgiving and gives you this ball speed and the consistency of speed across the face and then the consistency of spin. And funny enough, it's been some of our fastest players that have moved into the 2. And I think that just tour pros, they're just like you and me. If they see something working for someone else, they immediately get curious on that of like, let me try that.
Right.
But again, the shape was really the part that unlocked some of this. Max Homa was kind of our poster boy for that, in that when we were doing initial testing with Max, JJ asked me, he's like, hey, do you want to take a look at the 2? And Max is like, no, not really. If you need me to, I can do it. I know you guys are here to test it. I can take a look at it. He's like, so you let me know. And JJ looks at me, he's like, well, how'd you feel about those last 5 swings? And Max is like, what? And we're like, you've been hitting the 2 for the last 5 swings, and you absolutely crunched it. And that's when he was like, oh my gosh, he was laughing about it. He was like, this is like one of those old commercials where they secretly switch something and don't tell someone. But that's how that shape has evolved and has really helped a lot of the players say, you know what, let me give that a shot. And then once they do that, they see these terrific numbers. And so what we're seeing is a really nice, almost even split when it comes to working with players, and in our sales numbers right now of the 2 model and the 3 number, they're basically neck and neck.
Really? Well, yeah, it's interesting to me because we've done a fair bit of blind testing on THP, and you lose, especially when there's no graphics involved. You've done ball testings that have no logos on them, but you lose all, I don't want to say sensibility. You just don't really have that anything to latch onto as you go through it. So you're really forced to focus on the features that benefit. And especially from purely the eye test, like you talked about, would you call it the mule, where it's just like a steel head? I've seen those in a couple of trips I've made to California, and it's wild to think like I have no idea what this is, but I sure as hell want to hit it and and give my honest, awkward feedback, other than the chance to hit something that most people can get to. I'm curious about that because you're a bit of a geek like we are. So you see these guys at these clubs, and you probably know a thing or two about them that they don't. and then they make the do the tour guys end up making the same goofy golf assumptions that we would as amateurs when they go to hit these things? Do they, like you mentioned Homa convincing himself of one thing fairly quickly? Are they better or worse than we are when it comes to that?
They're very similar in
Okay.
that they're always excited to try something new and see something new. But they're also, because they're very well fit, and in many cases they've been having great success with their current product, they may go into it with a bit more skepticism. And I mean that in a nice way. I'm not throwing them under the bus here, but it's this idea of, hey, is this thing really going to make me better? And how is it going to do it? And what am I going to see? And that's why we're always like, hey, we're not going to show you a PowerPoint or a video presentation. We're going to get this in your hands and we're going to have you try it. And that's when we start to see, kind of that magic happen, where suddenly they're like, oh man, I missed that one on the toe and the spin didn't drop at all and it held its line the entire time. That thing should have been, headed to the trees, and instead it's barreling up the right side of the fairway. And that's really when those aha moments start to happen with them.
Nice. I feel like we should probably talk fairways. Otherwise, we're going to get through another episode without really focusing on it.
More feedback.
Yeah. But I think it's really worthy to spend a lot of time on it because they are a new design, new concept. I had the privilege of playing TSR. I was in the 3 and have actually moved into the GT2, which was a big shift for me, a surprising shift. Done mostly because the loft profile works really well. It's going to be typically a tee shot for me, down I think the 13.5 head. So there's a lot of benefits, but in many cases I would usually lean on that tour style head, the smaller head, because I can look at it a little better. I can work it a little better. I can do more things. But then as soon as I get this GT2 in my hands, I'm just like, no, this thing's cool. I like it. It's good. And it was a really positive fitting experience. And one of those things where you really have to just separate expectations from reality and say, like, let's hit whatever we can and hope that the numbers don't lie when you get to the golf course. And I've actually just live texted a couple of my buddies. I want their honest feedback. I have a fairway wood in the bag again. And it's good. So, huge lead in, but tell me, Josh, from your angle, from Titleist angle, what is the storyline on GT? Why is this fairway lineup matter?
Well, we were just talking about tour pros and how are they similar or different than the rest of us. And I would say one of the biggest similarities is in what they're looking for from a fairway wood. And that might surprise some people, but tour pros are constantly looking for more height of fairway wood. And for sure, the rest of us are. I think that when you start to look at whether it's a 3-wood or a 5-wood or you get down into your 7 or 9 woods, every golfer is looking for more height. They want that launch. They want that ball to stay in the air. And ideally, they want it to, if they're hitting off the tee, they want to get it, hit their number, find their target. But if they're hitting it into greens, and that's a lot of us, especially on longer holes, that's where we want to be able to not only hit our target, but stop and stay on our target. And so that was really the focus of the R&D team. And Tom Bennett does a terrific job leading our fairways and hybrids development, but he loves fairways more than anyone I've met. And he stole a lot of the same technologies and ideas that we were creating in drivers. So the same thing, and I brought some props. So we're going to, and for those of you who are just listening to this, I'll describe it as well. But similar to what you see when it comes to our driver, when you look down at these fairway woods, they look very clean, just what we were talking about before, Dan. They look, you could say like same old Titleist, very clean. But they have the same technology in that you've got this shell that comes off the top, this proprietary matrix material. So again, it clangs away like metal, but it looks and it gives us the opportunity to have multi-material. That allows us to push that CG really low. As you can see in both of our fairway woods, in the 2, we've got a big weight right up here in the front, towards the front. And then on the GT3, we actually have the movable weight track, again, all the way in the front. That helps us get that CG really low and get that ball flight super high. And then the last feature is we have kind of a wraparound face. So imagine this kind of L design, and that really helps us with low face impact. And why is that important on a fairway? Well, the majority of players kind of sweep their fairway. They don't really get down into it, even though we want you to, right? If we could get you a launch monitor, boy, we can get you down on that thing a degree, 2 degrees. That's going to be your best performance. But again, most golfers kind of sweepy, and so we want to protect those low face shots to really help you still not only get it in the air, keep that ball speed. And so it's kind of that combination of how do we get that CG in the spot we want it? How do we protect that low face shot? And what we're seeing is, boy, we've never had fairways that are as easy to just launch up high into the air and consistently feel great across the face.
You know, I think as much as the technology that you've referenced matters greatly, one of the most simple ways to get people's minds off what they're doing is to put something interesting on the crown. And in this case, it actually has a subtle GT logo there. And I don't know why. I love it. I think it's not just that for the driver as well. It almost takes your mind off what you're trying to do. You just get to swing the golf club. Most people would think it's maybe not most people. There are plenty of people out there probably think I'm insane right now. But it's just one of those things. And I'm curious about this because I remember back in the day you had that little like, is it like a pyramid shape that was on it with a line underneath it? I can't remember.
Called it a Fulton.
Okay, so we had that on there for a long time, and now you've shifted over the course of the last decade or whatever to these visuals. How much time goes into that? Like, do we put a GT on top? Do we put a dot on top?
Yeah, we've done, we do extensive studies on that. And what we're looking for is how do we put something that is pleasing for the majority of players? And what's interesting, if you put a line or a dot or two lines or an arrow, a triangle, all of those types of things, what happens is some players see that as open, some players see it as shut, some players see it as center, some players see it as distracting or as helpful. And so you get this full mix of all these different things. And what we try to do on both drivers and fairways is help you one feel confident right at address it, like, yep, I know where I'm going with this. This club is in a perfect position, and I know where I'm aiming and how I'm aiming. And so things that are subtle, like the GT, you'll also notice that the GT has, it does help you. There is some linear aspects to it, but it's curved. So it's not a direct arrow pointing in a certain direction. You get to kind of see how it moves with you. And it really help players find center face. And the same thing from a face design too. There are players who use the face to aim. And certainly as you look at our drivers, it's one of the reasons why we shade that inner area that kind of looks like a wide V or a U to really help you find that center face more often.
I think it's such an interesting thing because as I get more and more confident with it, when I look down at it, my head is almost like, we talk about all these positive reinforcements that you're supposed to do before you hit a golf ball. I know lots of guys who just step up to the ball and go, can't wait to see this one go out of bounds. But, you're not supposed to do that, right? So in this case, I've got this little GT on there. So in my head, I'm like, oh, it's GT time. And then I blast one, right? Like, it's this good, positive reinforcement. Maybe it's different for other people, but that's definitely how I feel about it. And, I've had a lot of fun just adding that to my mental piece. But I was curious on your side because I know that it can be distracting for some golfers. It can be challenging for people, especially when it changes year over year, to accommodate it or acclimate to it.
Well, we think about it as in proportion to the size of the head. As we start to get down into some of our smaller hybrids, we don't put anything on there because they're starting to look almost more iron-like or a utility iron-like. And so you're just like, well, I can see the face. I know where I need to be. And there's not a ton of depth there. But on some of our larger, certainly on fairways, and as we get into some of our larger hybrids, we want that. Just a little something to help you make sure you're feeling confident at address.
Tell me more about the CG decision and the challenges you face with a fairway wood for something like that, because driver is huge. You can, relatively speaking, you can really move that weight around. When you get to a fairway wood, and especially one that you want to be fairly sleek and aero friendly, it starts to become a bit more challenging to move that weight around, isn't it?
It is, especially in that you want to move some weight around. You don't have, like you said size. So you think of a 460cc driver versus roughly 180cc fairway, and that's a very big difference. You're working on a much smaller chassis when it comes to fairways, but you're still working on a product that has a very long shaft, right? You're looking at a 43-inch standard shaft on three woods. And so we want to make sure that we're making this product something that not only is appealing to your eye, but is going to help you really perform your best, especially on mishits. And in the case of a fairway wood, as I said at the beginning of this, we want to make sure that your first shot with this is barreling through the sky. And I think that's the thing that our team was so focused on and has done such a great job of. How do we do that? In this case, the biggest thing was we had to get weight off the crown. If we could get weight off the crown and get that further down, further both forward and to the sides, that could give us a sweet spot across the face, but help us get that CG low, because the lower the CG, the higher that initial ball flight is going to be.
I want to focus on the L cup face a little bit, and I only want to do that because I'm not fully sure I understand what's going on here. But let me sort of take a guess at it, and you can dance around my inability to really understand things. But
go engineer, Dan. You got this.
So my assumption is there are weld points that exist on a product, and the closer you get to those weld points, those like contact separators, the more likely you are to have a variance. And in the case of an L face, you'd be shoving that a little bit further away from contact point, to where that potential MOI that can exist across the face is going to go a lot further down now, rather than meeting up with that sort of contact point with a separate part of the head. Any truth to that at all?
Yeah, I think you nailed on a lot of things in that statement. To maybe make it a little easier for the average person listening, if we can take and put more face material, more face focus all the way wrapping around, it just really allows you to, on your lowest impact shots, that you've got a little bit more structure there, and that you're going to be able to maintain a little bit more speed coming off on that. And the reason we do it on fairway woods, and it's so important there, is that, again, look at the face height, right? When we're talking driver, you're up here, and you're almost always hitting driver off the tee, right? Probably 95% of the time or more, you're hitting driver off the tee. So you're not thinking, you're giving yourself, you're teeing that ball up, you're giving yourself the best chance to hit it in the center of the face, or certainly high on the face. Whereas go to fairways, much smaller to start with, and probably the majority of the time you're hitting it off the turf, right? So now you've really got to be able to get down in there and hit that. So we've got to give you some forgiveness on those low face shots, which are just going to occur. It's just part of the game.
Right. I think when I hit fairways bad, and I know it's different because a lot of guys will hit it heel side, but I tend to hit it really toey. I tend to catch that toe side. What's the challenge there? I'm going to date myself a little bit, saying I remember really investing in hybrids back when they look like... it basically looked like a big L. It's a tiny little head that would just absolutely whip around and hook the ball at the worst possible time, purely because I hit it out in the toe. So, when it comes to a fairway wood, assuming it's a challenge to make sure that those heel shots and those toe shots still have a lot of balance forward, rather than aggressively falling off line. What's the challenge like that in a fairway wood?
So on a fairway wood, we want to make sure we can spread as much weight across that product as possible. So if we can get a whole lot of weight out here towards the toe and a whole lot of weight back here towards the hosel, that's going to give us the best opportunity to keep you in that very nice, stable impact position, no matter where you're making impact, right? We want to get you in that spot. The second thing, when it comes to impact, is, again, and I know I come on here on a broken record for this, please go get fit. We have so many things we can do to align your impact position either closer to the center or put the CG behind your impact location. So this hosel sleeve and giving you adjustable loft and lie really does make a difference for how golfers are approaching their shot. The second one is, as we go to GT3, we've got movable weight. So we can put that weight out towards the toe if that's where you're making contact, or back towards the heel if that's where you're making the majority of your contact, and just see what happens when we align those CGs to your impact location. Majority of the time, golfers are finding straighter, longer, faster ball flight off of that.
How'd you know that's what I was going to talk about next? I don't really understand what's going on here. I'm not sharing screen, am I? You mentioned the CG.
Wait, you've prepped for this? There's like a list of topics?
I happen to prep for these. Yeah, it's almost ridiculous. Knowing fully well what you do when you come on. But do you guys still kind of call it the elevator system? I know it has a tech term, but the idea that you can basically have this thing that's effectively inside the head and offers no impact, no holes to dig through in the turf, and then it just lifts up with a screw, and you can move the weight around inside it to support whether trying to move the weight toward the toe or move it toward the heel. Has that changed a little bit this year as compared to TSR?
So what we love about it is it's towards the front. That allows us to keep that CG really low. We've got 5 positions, and we love the elevator approach. It allows us, it's so important on a fairway to be able to keep you that very clean, smooth sole, because you are interacting with the turf. We just talked about, if we can, we'd love you to be a degree or 2 down on it in your impact. So we want you hitting into the ground. And so we've got to give you that great feel in and out of that turf. And this gives us a chance to do that. And again, we really do believe in fitting. That's why we've got these different models. I don't know if we've even talked about this yet, Dan, but the 2 it's kind of your easy button, right? It is going to go really high, really far, and it's exceptionally forgiving. The 3 I tend to think of for players who like to hit it off the tee as much as off the turf. It's a little bit of a taller face, and if you're really good at leaning on it, kind of getting down the turf, man, this thing is a great product for you. Again, just like what we're seeing in driver, we're seeing almost a perfect split on tour. We're a little bit heavier on the 2 model than we are on the 3. And what's interesting there is, again, please go get fit. Please go try these, because it's not a it's not a matchy thing. We're not ending up with players like, well, I play GT2 driver, so I play GT2 fairway, and if I have 2 fairways, they're both GT2. We see all sorts of combinations through our fittings, where you might be a GT3 driver, GT2 in your 3 wood, and we might even go GT3 in your 5 wood. So really interesting to see these different examples that exist. So I would really encourage everyone, don't just listen to our pod, even hopefully listen to the pod, but don't run out and buy this just because of the pod. Go try it and see what works best in your game.
Well, I've already proved that by saying that I went from GT4 to GT3, and then again in the fairway I went from GT3 to GT2. So there's not,
I did the same thing on
TSR to GT. But yeah, I mean there's a definitive shift in the storyline. I assume it's different for the individual, but what I do want to ask you about is GT2 and GT3. It seems to be pretty much a staple in the lineup, but I've never really seen that 4 sneak into the fairway wood. Why is that?
Well, we're always looking to figure out, do we have the right models to fit the majority of our golfers? And so there's 2 things in this space we should talk about. Number 1, GT2 and GT3 are going to always be our workhorse. They fit the majority of our golfers, especially when we start to talk about all the things we can do with them. Head weight adjustability, hosel adjustability, CG adjustability, endless list of options. But there are some golfers out there that we're not reaching. And the biggest group that we're not reaching with the 2 or 3 model are players who actually even need more help getting the ball up in the air. And those players may need a little bit more spin. They certainly need a little bit more launch, and they may need some more speed to do that. And with that, we have our 1 model. So right now, the TSR 1 still exists in the marketplace. It's a terrific product. It is the easiest thing in the world to launch. But we're certainly working on a GT1, and we'll probably have that ready sometime in the next, few 4 or 5 months, somewhere in that range, because we know there's players who need even more help launching that thing as high as possible. Now, on the other side of that, we don't really run into a ton of players who are looking for a super low launch, low spin fairway wood. In fact, that we kind of find that that's their miss it today, and we're trying to help them get that fairway wood up in the air. And so that's why we don't have a GT4. For players who need spin reduction, boy, the 2 really does a great job with that. And again, we've got different loft combinations and that hosel that really help us dial that in. But the majority of players are actually looking for high launch, kind of low to mid spin with the fairway, and that's where GT2 really comes into play. So it is kind of giving you the 4 response that you'd be looking from in a driver.
Okay. Do you ever get during the process the idea that like maybe we should slide one out here? We sort of designed this head, it's checking all those boxes, but probably not this time around. Is it ever get close?
Oh, we test all sorts of ideas, and one of the big things, and you mentioned TSR, and I brought up as well, the TSR2 and the TSR3. If we were being critical to ourselves, we're probably getting a little bit close in their performance of the 2 and the 3 model. The 1 model is doing a terrific job of separating itself, but the 2 and the 3, one of the things that we would say internally is we're like, hey, we shouldn't be able to walk up to players and have them easily fit into either one of those. We haven't pushed them far enough apart if that's the case. We want some players to go in this direction and some to go in this direction, because that's going to give them their performance capabilities. And so we're always pushing in that space of like, are we able to help improve our golfers' games? And what are the types of things we need to do that? And that's always our quest. And so we test all sorts of weird shapes. It could even be like super strong hybrid shapes, 18-degree hybrids. Is that the type of fairway wood performance that players are looking for? So we dig through all of that to figure out what makes sense. Okay. And I think what's so unique is, let's talk about high lofted fairway woods for a minute, whether it's a weak 5 wood that's kind of like a 6 wood, a 7 wood, a 9 wood. That space of kind of 7 wood to a strong lofted hybrid to a utility iron, there are so many options for players in the top end of their bag at that point that's really where it's great to go spend time with a fitter and figure out which one works right for you, because simply trying to guess your way into that is tough to do. And again, we look for what should help you with that solution is you want to have 5-mile-an-hour ball speed gaps from your last iron, and as you work your way through your bag. And then we call them the 3Ds. We want to see really consistent carry distance, tight dispersion, and a steep descent angle. Because if whatever that product is, kind of in that 7 wood or strong lofted hybrid or a utility iron, they're all going to be products that you're hitting into greens. And so we want to make sure you can hold those. So again, it's that 5-mile-an-hour ball speed gap from whatever you've got behind it or in front of it. And then you want to have those 3Ds really come to life. But most important is that descent angle. We really want that ball coming out of the sky at 45 degrees or more if we can do it. And then if that's too nerdy, maybe another way is, hey, if you hit your 7-iron 100 feet in the air, well, guess what? That's what your 5-iron should be. That's what your 4-iron or utility should be, your hybrid or the 7 wood. They should all be at that same peak height.
So I'm going to ask you a loaded question here. Hopefully you can dance around it if I'm asking too much. But, hybrids are always an interesting conversation. And using technology, sometimes we see it be similar. Sometimes we see it be significantly different. What's Titleist's take on that? Are you trying to move a lot of the technology that exists in the fairwood into the hybrid, or are you trying to look at that as a different animal?
I think we're always open to technology, 100%. But what we're really trying to do is help golfers play their best with that product. And so we're not going to just force the technology in there to be like, oh, well, here's the marketing story for this driver. Let's put it in everything. If it works, fine, great. But that's not we're not going to force, a square peg, round hole, or if I got that backwards, round peg, square hole. We're not going to force it that way if we don't need it. We're always going to start with, what do we do? And I can't give away everything on our next gen hybrids, but I will say they have different constructions across models because of we want to make sure they're doing different things for different players, and that's really important to us. The other one that's really important to us is even on this podcast, I think I've said fitting probably 12 times. Please go get fit for your hybrid. I don't know how many other companies still have adjustable loft sleeves or CG adjustability or headweight adjustability. We believe in all of those things. All of those things are going to help you play better golf. When we look at our tour pros, the majority of them have made a change in one of those three areas to help them maximize their hybrid performance. And so we want people to do that. And unfortunately, hybrids are actually the lowest fit category. That's your fun fact for the day, Dan. Not just for us, everybody. This is a segment-wide problem here. Is that less than 20% of golfers have been fit for their hybrid, and
Really?
And then you just leave in performance, on sitting there.
Interesting. I wouldn't have expected it to be hybrid. I feel like hybrid's such an exploratory product. I would feel like
it's hybrid and wedge are duking it out for least fit. But wedges, and I give our Vokey team a ton of credit on this one, have crept above hybrids, but it's still at like 20-ish%. And that's a shout out for the Vokey team. If anyone's listening to this, I know you're probably tuned in for Metals Talk. Wedge fitting is the single quickest thing you can do to improve your game in general. It is super fun. You don't need speed, and you can start to wedge it, like a professional very quickly.
That is such a hot take. I love it. It's like you're begging for the forum to argue with you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, please hit me up and tell me why I'm wrong. But I only want to hear from people that have been through a wedge fitting.
Yeah, sure. Awesome, man. I'm excited. Like I know that was sort of targeted on the hybrids. I know we're not in a cycle where it's upcoming in the very near future, but it's always an interesting component because for me there is that next connection, and you can easily mirror your driver with your 3-wood, or at least support it with what I like to call that supporting cast kind of feeling, where it's that next option off the tee. But that hybrid, it sits in such an interesting space. It's like, do we want this thing to play like an iron? Do we want this thing to be like a 3-wood? Like, where do we fit with this? And the other part is you're describing what most people should do, and I'm sitting here going like, that's not what I do in my bag. And I know it's I've been called, I've had a Franken bag for a long time, but the idea of I have very specific tools for very specific shots, and it's probably not the smartest thing. So I look forward to chatting more about it.
That's realistic for so many golfers, and some of it is, what's your bag set up for if you have a home course, right?
Yeah.
And if you do, you're playing that course a lot, and suddenly you're like, I need this shot 3 times around, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to put this club in my bag because those 3 shots are really important to me, and I know I'm going to have them. Like they're on the card, they're going to happen. Versus if you're someone who is traveling most of the time, or is playing public golf, where you're at, you don't have one home course, you have like a rota of like 5 or 6. It's really interesting to figure out like, what do you need in your bag at all times? It's also a good plug that, hey, the USGA only limits the 14 club rule for tournament play. The rest of us goofballs can have plenty more clubs with them. And I should point out, that's one of the things that surprised a lot of players, is that touring professionals travel with way more golf clubs than you or I ever do, right? They're figuring out via condition, via their practice rounds, what tweaks are they going to make to their bag setup. And so it's something that all of us should think about. And Dan, you and I are getting ready to go play golf together. And so we're going to be traveling, and I can guarantee you I will have more than 14 clubs that make the trip. I'll play with 14. I don't want any feedback from the TH peers of if there's any sort of wagering going on the side.
We'll do, you obviously aren't coming with a 14 way, so that's already a big win for you. No, I actually did this last night. I went and played, we walked 6 holes because it got slow. But I always have my U505s in there, my 1 and my 3. And I have the 3-wood in there, and I didn't feel like carrying an extra club, so I pulled the wrong one out. I pulled out my 3 thinking I was pulling my 1 out. and I get to our 6th hole, and it's this dog leg left. I hit the 3 every time. If it draws, it draws. If it goes straight, I'm in play. And I look down, I'm like, oh no, I don't have it. I felt so helpless. But to your point, like, that's our goal. We should get clubs in our bag that we just truly have faith in, and you find that right wheelhouse. It's pretty fun, honestly.
Yeah, it gets back to that confidence point of, I know what to hit here. I know when I hit this club, I hit it well, it's doing this. And that's a great spot to be in. And again, the best way to do that, and I promise THPers it's fun, go get fit for clubs. Check out Titleist.com. You'll have a great time. You'll find, and I would suggest, if you can, if you live in an area where there's a Titleist fitter and he's got availability, have a blast. And I mean that through all parts of your bag. Not just, I realized I threw out the gauntlet earlier of wedge fitting is the greatest thing ever. I do believe it's the fastest way to get better. But again, if you can't hit fairways, or if your driver isn't going in the air, boy, we can change your game real fast that way too. And same thing with your fairway woods, irons, and all the way through. But it's worth it. It's fun. Might be a little nerve wracking because you got to show off your swing to a stranger. But trust me, they've seen it all, and they're here to help.
Yeah, and I think the one last point is worth making is, I think a lot of these guys that I've experienced, especially any of the times I've been with Titleist, every fitter is excited to see something get better. There's this like teamwork involvement. Like if you really let go and just let the fitter work and be as honest as possible, when you guys get that number, like when I was at my driver fitting, my fairway wood fitting, we started chasing numbers. Like it was actually really fun. You become a team if you're doing it right, and they're going to show you that involvement. It becomes a really fun experience. So
yeah, I promise you, it's kind of like back to school season's going on right now here. And when you go in and you meet your kids' teachers, and you see the ones who are they just love teaching. That is why they're doing it. There's this intrinsic part of it. And that's what I see with we call them our fit crew. And that's what I see with our Titleist fitters, is that they love this. It's not so much the turning of the wrench they love, or solving the puzzle. It's they love helping you play your best and getting a smile on your face and hearing about, like, oh wow, let's, like, now you hear the phrase sometimes, the guys, let's get greedy. We already got it out. Let's see if we can push this a little bit more. And if that's that teamwork function of just like, we can build you something that's going to make you great. And they, trust me, they love doing it. I love being around them. I get energized just talking about it. You can probably hear it in my voice. It's totally worth it. And so I would say, if you're on the fence, you haven't done it, it's great. I can promise you that. And I will sleep well tonight knowing we can even get one extra person to go try doing a fitting that hasn't.
I love it. Hey, I can't wait to hang out. We'll see you at Hidden Creek Titleist Experience. The guys are going to be super excited to get their drivers in fairway woods, playing an absolutely unbelievable golf course. That's going to be so much fun. That's coming up soon. I think when this drops, it will be basically the next couple of days. So hope you're excited to do that.
Follow along on the forum. You can see. My favorite part about that is when everyone's like capturing my food reviews. So we'll do plenty of that, as well as spend some time with a great group. I love doing this. Every year we get a chance to do it. It is so much fun to connect with the community, connect with a handful of forum members in person, but see the broader group get behind it. It's a blast for us. Stephanie Luttrell, who leads our Metalwoods team, is going to be there. And Stephanie is a former collegiate golfer at University of Michigan. So she's a great player, but she's even a better person. Super fun to be around. Jacqueline Duncan, who heads up our outreach team, is going to be there. So it is going to be a blast. Hopefully you guys are going to watch and listen to it, and you'll see if we make a fool of ourselves, but that's kind of part of the fun.
That's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, if you guys haven't, go give GT a test drive. I think it'll surprise you. Everyone's played or hit a Titleist before. That's just kind of the way it goes. Go hit it and see what you think. I've been pretty blown away this encounter I've had, and I think you will too. So definitely check them out, Drivers and Fairways. And if you are playing golf this weekend, have fun. We're almost at aeration season, so honestly, Josh didn't even know what that is, but you know, us in the Midwest, we're about to be suffering. So you better make these last couple rounds count. I know you will, and compliment someone if they are hitting it well, because I know they need to hear it. We'll see you guys next week.